Hi and welcome. In this video I want to show you my top 10 things that it's important for beginners with Photoshop to know about the Layers panel. Now a problem for beginners is that they don't always know what they don't know. So it can be a problem them getting the right and to ask the right questions. So this is like a little bit of intense video therapy on the Layers panel that you can use as a short reference and quickly look back on it. Now if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up or leave a comment under the video. And if you're feeling good and you like it, then please share it around with your friends. And lastly, please click that subscribe button. It does help me to grow my Photoshop learning community. Now if you're a fan of the printed page, there is an ebook to accompany the video. Just click the link in the More section under the video on YouTube or click the download button on the website to get it. Well, let's get this show on the road. My name's Ken Fisher and this is LiveLink Training. Now a core skill to be learned is how to add and delete layers. Now in Photoshop there's always more than one way to do something. I'm going to show you my favourite in each section. Now to add an empty layer, what we're going to do, down at the bottom of the Layers panel we've got these little icons. And this one here next to the trash can, if I hover over it, it'll give you a little tool tip. Create a new layer. And if I click on that, it'll bring me up a new layer. And I can go up if I want and rename it. And it's a useful thing to do really. So I'm going to rename this my layer. And all I've done is I've just clicked where the actual word is for the layer, the name of the layer, and I've typed in a new layer. Now if we want to delete the layer, then I can click and drag it and drop it over the trash can. Now you've got to be careful here because you can see where I am at the moment. I've got a no entry sign, and if I let that go, nothing will happen. If I drag it and I go too far, I get back to a no entry sign again and nothing will happen. What you've got to watch for is when you drag it, when you get it over the trash can, you get a little hand, and then this hand just little releases and lets it go, and that deletes the layer for you. Now if you want to add a layer and rename it at the same time, there's a cute little shortcut for that. If you hold the Alt key down and then click on the new layer icon, it brings you up the new layer dialog, and here I can rename it to Ken's layer. I've got my own layer. You can always do some other stuff as well, like give it a colour label, blending mode, opacity, but for today all we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to add it and we're going to click OK. Now the new layer is always going to go above the active layer. Now this is the active layer at the moment, this Ken's layer, so if I put another layer on now, it will go above Ken's layer. But what happens if I want that to go underneath Ken's layer? Well, I can do that as well. I'll just drop that in the trash just for a second. So here we've now got the active layer, but now if I hold the Control key down or the Command key on a Mac and click the new layer icon, it puts it underneath for me. Is that not cool? So do nothing and it will put it above. Hold the Control or Command key down and it will put it underneath for you. Just saves you a little bit of dragging, that's all. Number 2 on our agenda is blend modes. Now the layer blending modes can be found in the Layers panel at the top where it says Normal, and if you click this little arrow you will drop down a set of blending modes. Now what are they? Well, these are just intelligent ways of blending two different layers together. You have to have two layers for it to work. But there's a lot of mathematics in this, in the way these work, but we don't ever have to know that because all we do is we just play around with them, and some of them work a lot, some of them are very arty and you'll probably not use that much. A favourite of mine is, you can see here that I've got a fill layer which is filled with a colour, and I've got a black and white layer underneath it, and I might want to blend that colour with the black and white image underneath it. So I'm just going to go to the blend mode and I'm going to select one. Let's try overlay. Well, that's not bad, that gives me a decent effect. And another favourite of mine is colour. I'm just going to click on the colour one. Oh, and I like that a little bit better. And what that's doing is blending by some mathematical method the colour from the top layer with the pixel detail from the bottom layer. So what you need to do is just create a couple of layers, put some colours in and play around with different blend modes. Number 3 is moving images in the stack. Well, what's a stack? Well, here we've got a stack of layers, and this is the name that's given. This is the layer stack. Now the order of the layers in the stack is important. Here we can see that I've got 4 layers and each one has got a colour on and a number on. Now your eye is up here looking down, and these are all pieces of acetate which I've just painted a little bit of colour on with a number. So there I can see through all this area here. So what do I see when I look down? Well, first I see the number 1 and I see all the yellow. But in this area it's clear, so I can then see through to the layer underneath, which is this number 2 layer. Now number 2 has some clear areas on it as well. So at this side of number 2 we see the layer 1 because those are immediately above it, and those are the pixels that you see first. Now underneath layer 2 there's all transparent areas as well. So now I can see in this area here, I can see through to number 3, which is this one. And then in number 3 we've got transparent areas at this side, and I can see through to number 4, which is this one. But these are all different sizes, so does positioning the stack matter? Well, yes it does, because at the moment, let's take for example, I've got number 1 and I've got number 2, but part of number 2 is missing because it's covered up by number 1. So if I wanted to give priority to number 2, to layer number 2, so to see all of that layer first, then I've got to click on it and I've got to drag it to the top of the stack. And what I've got to watch for is that little line appearing. If you go too far, it'll disappear and it won't drag. But if I just wait till I get that line across and let go, then it will now put layer 2 at the top of the stack. And now I can see all of layer 2, and layer 1, this edge, is underneath it. And the same goes now. I can change the layer stack and say number 3. I want to see more of number 3. So let's drag that up and drop it into position there. So now I can see all of this number 2, all the red in number 2. I can see just the little, most of the blue except the bit that goes under this red part. And number 1 basically goes underneath 1 and 3, so it's hidden behind them both. And then number 4 is right down at the bottom. Now if I want to give number 4 a lot of priority in the layer stack, then it needs to be at the top, because then I'll see it first. So again, I'll click on that layer and I'll drag it up until I get that line and then let go, and it drags number 4 to the top of the stack. So now I see number 4 first. So I can see number 4, and then everything else has lesser priority underneath it. So does ordering the stack matter? Well, yes it does. And can you change it? Yes you can, just by clicking and dragging and watching out for that double line just to appear, and then drop it into place. Number 4 is effects. Now what are effects? These are things like drop shadows and strokes that you can add to a selection, to a layer, or to text. Now let's have a look at that. Here I've got a 2-layer document. I've got a text layer that says Elsica Res, because that's what it is. And I'd like to make it stand out a little bit better. So I'm going to add an effect to it. Now the effects panel is down here, this little FX icon. If I click and hold down there, I've got access to my blending options, which brings up my whole panel with all the options in. Or I can target a specific one by just moving up and down and then letting the mouse button go. Let's go for my blending option. I'm going to click on that one, and it's going to bring me quite a big panel up here, and here are all the blending options that we can use. We've got bevel and embossed, strokes, satin, colour overlays, gradient overlays, the whole shooting match. So let's just put a drop shadow on that layer. So I'm going to double click and it puts a drop shadow on based on the default settings that were there when I left it. So you can play around with, move the drop shadow around a bit, you can spread it out a bit, you can basically tailor it to your needs. Oh, that's not very good, that. Let's just soften it off a little bit again. There we go. So we've got a little bit of a drop shadow going off on that text, and you can see it here under the text layer. We've got the effects and we've got a drop shadow. Now obviously sometimes this is going to get quite long if you add multiple effects. So there's a little triangle here, a little disclosure triangle, and if you click on it after you've closed the panel down, of course. You weren't watching, were you? You weren't watching. Okay, so I'll accept that as okay. And then I'll go, and there's a little triangle here, and if you click on it, it closes it up. So it just tidies your layer stack up a little bit. I'll leave it open for the time being. Now you can add more than one effect at a time while the panel's open. So I'll go back down to the FX panel and click it, and then I'll select blending options again. You can see I've still got my shadow, my drop shadow blending option on my Elsevier Res. So, but this time I'd like to do it on the background layer. I'd like to do something where I can highlight this foreground interest. Okay, so I'm going to just click on the background layer and I'll just make a selection around that area. And I'm just going to jump it to a new layer with Control and J, or Command and J if you're on a Mac. And of course you can't see it because I've got the same pixels above as I have below. So this is where the effects come in. I can now put an effect on the edges of this to make it stand out. So again, I'm going to go to my FX panel, select blending options, and this time let's put a drop shadow on. Again, we use a similar drop shadow to we did before, or we might need a little bit more to make it stand out. There we are. And we'll add a stroke while we're here. And we can change the colour of the stroke, and we can play about with the structure of the stroke here. We can make it thicker or smaller. I'll leave it set to something like that just to highlight it a little bit, and I'll click OK. So you can see here now that they've been added to the layers. On the text layer we've got a drop shadow. On the selection that I've made we've got a stroke and we've got a drop shadow, just to bring that out a little bit from the background. Next is number 5. Change the visibility of a layer. Now there are many reasons why you might want to switch a layer on or off. Now if you switch it on, it's visible. If you switch it off, it's not visible, and we do that via these little eyeballs here. So if I want this layer here, which has got this little cutout on it, to be invisible, I click on that and it disappears. I'll switch that back on again. And even the effects, I can turn the whole effect off by making the effect invisible by clicking on that. Or I can just select one of these and say, well, I don't want the stroke on this, just have a look. So I'm going to just switch that stroke off. And then to click, I can switch it back on again. And you can do it for all the layers. So you switch the background layer off and back on. You can switch any layer or any effect to make it visible or invisible by just clicking its visibility eye. Next we've got number 6, adding and deleting a mask. Now masking is a little bit like black magic. It's where we can selectively hide or reveal pixels by painting with black or white onto a mask. Very, very powerful. Now we can add a mask by just going down to the add mask button down here. If I just hover over it just for a second, it'll say add layer mask, and if I click on that, it puts me a layer mask on. Now if I want to delete the layer mask, I've got to go to the layer mask and I can drag it and drop it in the bin. It'll come up and say, what do you want to do? Apply, cancel or delete. In this instance I want to delete it. Now I'll just put another mask on just to show you a little tip. That at the moment I've got my mask active. You can see that because it's got this like double line round it. My image at the moment on this layer is not active. If I click on my image, it will make it the active part of the layer. Now when you're masking, the mask must always be the active part, because if you don't do that, then you're going to be painting with black or white on your actual image pixels, which is not going to do you a lot of good. Okay, so that's adding and deleting a layer mask. Number 7 is grouping layers together. Now, as your experience with Photoshop grows, you may find that you start to create lots and lots of layers. Now, many of them will be related in some form or another. So to tidy up your layer stack, you can create groups, which are like little folders, and you can place in there related images. And this will seriously tidy up your layer stack. Here you can see I've got a layer stack, and I've got quite a few layers in it. And here I've got a patch of yellow over this side, and I've got the text yellow, and I've got the number 4. And it's the same on the others. I've got this blue background, and then I've got some text on it, and I've got a number in text form on it as well. And you can see I've not got many layers, but it's getting out of control. So what can I do about it? Well, let's try and make a group. Now, what we do with groups is we need to select the layers that we want to put in the group. So I'm going to click on that number 4 one, and then I'm going to hold the shift key down and click on the yellow. So this is all the layers that are to do with yellow. The yellow, the text, and the number 4. And now I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, Control or Command if you're on a Mac, and G. And that's going to put them into a little group. And I can rename the group by double clicking on the name, and I'll put yellow, because that's what's inside it. And then I can go on and do the rest. So I've got my blue set now, so I'll click on the first one, I'm going to shift click on the last one, and then do Control or Command and G, and I've got my blue group. And then the same with my green. Click on the first one, shift click on the last one, and then Control or Command G to put them in a group, and I'll call this one, I think it was green, weren't it? I'm forgetting. Green. And then we've got the red ones. We'll click on the first one, shift click on the last one, then Control or Command G to put them into another group. And this one I'll call red. You see, I forgot then. Okay, so you can see how tidy the layer stack is now. And what I can do, if I just want to look at what's in the yellow, I click this little triangle here, and this is called the disclosure triangle, and it shows me what's in the group. So I click that. Now it's facing down. This is the folder, or the group is open. So I've got all my yellow in there, I've got all my blues in there, got all my greens, and I've got all my reds. But my stack's in a much better place now, because they're all in their relative positions. And I've got a nice tidy layer stack. Number 8 is adding and deleting adjustment layers. Now, what's an adjustment layer? Well, it's a non-destructive way of editing. It's an adjustment, but it's on a layer, so you can save it with the document itself. And these are down here with this little black and white yin and yang signal, and it says create new fill or adjustment layer. If I click and hold down, I'll find that I've got all these adjustments. I'll scroll up and I'll pick on levels. Just give it a click. And now you'll find two things have happened. That we've got an adjustment layer up here, which is sitting above the layer, so it's non-destructive, and we can throw it away if we don't like it. And then the properties panel opens up, and we get the adjustment where we can make all the adjustments. We can play around with the sliders. Now there's two parts of this layer. There's the mask and there's the adjustment. So if I click on the adjustment, I get in the properties panel the properties of the adjustment. If I click in the mask, it takes me to the properties of the mask, where I can change the density and the feather, and then I can also select a mask, color range and invert. So it's really all the properties to do with a mask. Right, now to delete it, it's just a case of dragging it and dropping it in the bin again, but you've got to be careful, because you don't want to be dragging on the mask, you want to drag on the adjustment. So if I want to throw all this away, then I'm going to click and drag and drop it in the bin. Okay, so that's adding and deleting adjustment layers. Number 9 is the panel flyout menu. Now there are lots of additional commands and some of the same ones that we use with keyboard shortcuts that live in the panel flyout menu. So where is it? Well, if we look at the top right hand corner here, just under the closing down X, we've got these little lines, and this is the little symbol for the panel flyout menu. So if I click and hold my mouse button down on that, it gives me access to all these extra commands. And all I do is I click on one to activate it. So this one, if I want to duplicate my layer, it'll bring up the duplicate layer dialog and I can click OK. So that's the panel flyout menu. And lastly but not leastly, we've got number 10. How to change the thumbnail size. Now Photoshop does give you options on whether you want to display a thumbnail or not, and if you do, how big the thumbnail is. Now I like my thumbnails to be nice and big. Now to change this, it's a preferences thing, and if you've got any space underneath your background layer here, or underneath your bottom layer, then if you right click you get access to no thumbnails, small thumbnails, medium thumbnails. So no thumbnails will give me exactly that, no thumbnails. And if I want small thumbnails, they're too small. I need my super duper glasses on to be able to see what's going off there. So my default one is large thumbnails, because that's how I like them. And if you've got no space at the bottom and it's a long way off, if you've got a long layer stack, then it's actually in the panel flyout menu as well. If you click on the panel flyout menu, down there you've got panel options. If you click on that, then your panel options box comes up and you can choose from the thumbnail size. So you can have none, small, medium, or as I've got, large, and then click OK. Well, that's it for this video. 10 things I think beginners should know when starting out their journey into Photoshop. I do hope you liked it and you will find it useful. If you did, give me a thumbs up or leave me a comment under the video, or share it with a friend or two. Now don't forget to check the more area under the video for the link to the free ebook and any work files that I might post. And please click the subscribe button so when I upload a new video you are the first to know. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.